You're listening to The Private Citizen. This is episode 166 for Thursday, the 28th of March, 2024. The Twitter Files, Part 6. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome to The Private Citizen, a civil liberties podcast. My name is Fab. I'm your host, as usual. You should know me by now. But just in case, I'm coming to you from Düsseldorf, which is in Germany, on the lovely and very historic River Rhine, on a Thursday morning. Well, it's coming up to noon, but for me this is morning, and got my morning coffee and ready to do another show. Well, as ready as I can be. I was let me just get some coffee here. I did some Muay Thai practice last night, and I got kicked a lot, like a motherfucker. Now I feel like punching bag. Pro tip: if you want to get into martial arts, don't do it at the age of 40, when you basically haven't done sports for 20 years, because your body will complain, which is what my body is doing today. I'm very sore. But, that's my brain is intact. Didn't get hit in the head, so that's good. So I'm ready for some intellectual pursuits, if you can call it that. Today, as promised for a long time, we're diving back into the Twitter files. And this is, I had this episode prepared for a long time. For reasons I explained last episode, I didn't do a show in a while. But here I am. I'm back. And let's do this. I'm again doing this show. I'm doing a video recording of the show, so if you want to see that, you can go to YouTube. If you want to know where, you can find everything on privatecitizen.press. That's where the show notes are. And for this episode, obviously there are a lot of show notes. And there's also a link to the video on YouTube if you want to see me. See my face while I do this. It's not that interesting. So if you're listening to a podcast on your commute, as some people are allegedly doing, hello Evgeny, then you're not missing that much. It's just my face in a window and then the desktop I use so people can see what I actually look at on my screen when I'm recording this, which is basically, the podcast recording program, an audio player, and the show notes. Let's, without further ado, let's get into today's topic. Let's get back into the Twitter files. And today we're going to talk about how Donald Trump got banned off Twitter. Which is, this isn't a news show. And that's good, because this isn't news. Of course, this happened a long time ago. This was so we are talking today. Most of the show, most of the stuff, this iteration of the Twitter files is about concerns the stuff surrounding the 6th of January 2021, which was a time when Donald Trump had lost against Joe Biden in the last presidential election, and it was the time. It's the time when he was still president. When you're still president, but the new president is coming in, and the inauguration of Biden was coming up, and then of course this stuff that happened on January 6th happened. I'm not going to go deeply into that. I did an episode about that when it happened, and I still think most of my observations from that still stand. There's a link to that in the show notes, of course. If you go to privatecitizen.press, you can find that episode. I don't even know when episode that. I think it was 51. Yeah, that was 51. So there's a link to that episode there. What I'm talking about today is not so much about Donald Trump, or it's more about, it could have been any president any U.S. president who got banned off Twitter. Of course, it couldn't have been. It could only have been Trump. But that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this historic moment, and I truly believe this is a historic moment. This will be a historic moment that will go into the history books. And I think one of the reasons is the act in itself, but also the Twitter Files reporting by Matt Taibbi and his colleagues. So today we're talking about this, one of the earliest Twitter Files iterations. It's Matt Taibbi, Michael Schellenberger, and Barry Weiss, who all did part of this. I kind of picked and chose from the Twitter Files stuff on this. Of course, there's links to everything. I got screenshots and all of that in the show notes. So when the actual act happened, maybe I can recap that a little bit. I was very, not surprised because it was Donald Trump, and they had been talking about banning him from Twitter for ages. Even I think when I was still working, writing about the stuff at Heise when I was still employed at, before I quit and became a freelance journalist, and people were talking about that. And I also always told my colleagues, my editorial colleagues there, that I thought that was crazy, like banning Donald Trump. Like, you're a company in the United States and you decide to ban your head of state, like the sitting president. That's like, some guy, some low-level guy in HR in a company decides it would be okay. It would be great if they could just fire a CEO, and then just I don't know, modern companies, they don't have keys anymore, right? They have key cards or whatever to get into the building, and then you just delete the CEO's like key card and then can't get in the building anymore, right? That's how I felt about this. What surprised me afterwards was that Trump just took it. I thought, one of the reasons was probably, and that's probably the reason they did it when they did it, because he was going out. He wasn't like, he was still the president, but you're not really considered to be the president at that moment, right? You're still the president, but you're not supposed to do any like legislation or anything or like executive orders. So that's probably the reason he didn't do that. But I was fully expecting him to, like, I'm like, is he going to send in the National Guard to the Twitter HQ to like restore his account? Like, that would have, to be honest, that would have not surprised me. Because, people they talk about social media and they talk about Twitter or, X or whatever it's called now. Like it is just like a folly. This is just like, I don't know. Just like banning your Twitter account is like banning your Spotify account, and then you can't listen to music anymore or something like that, right? Or like banning getting you off Netflix. But that's not what it is, because I've talked about this on the show a lot, and that's why I think this is very important, and this is a historic moment, and it's very important to talk about how this came about. It really is our way. It's our it's like the communication platform. Like years, decades ago now, Leo Laporte, when talking about why he thought Twitter was important, in the beginning of Twitter, always said it's like the nervous system of the internet. I don't think he came up with that, but that's where I got it from, and I think that's very true. Twitter is a very unique social network. Just by the way it was built, by the way people used it. It became kind of the de facto way to disseminate news in the world. And journalists for decades now have gotten most of their breaking stories from Twitter. And it's just a way for the public to interact directly, not only with other parts of the public, but also with the media, with celebrities, and with people like Donald Trump, with the president of the United States. And because Trump from the beginning, Obama is credited as the president who won his first election, or I think maybe even more his second election, by the use of the internet, by sidestepping established communication channels, the press in certain extent, getting votes from especially younger people by using Twitter. But I think the credit really belongs to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump's I mean, Obama kind of started it, but it wasn't that important for him. He was very much an establishment man, right? He used all those channels, and Trump from the beginning was in such an adversarial relationship with the press that he really needed a direct communication channel, and he kind of established that. The way to use that, which has now been taken over by most politicians, like that's how politicians in the German government, for example, where I am, communicate with the public, with their voters. It has become, I would argue, more important than the official press conferences by the government that they hold, where the journalists are and they report on that. So it's a very important platform. It's just not another social network. It was for Trump the way he won the election. And after that, his main communication channel, because for good reason, right? People, I talk like this, and then people think I'm a Donald Trump fan, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing like the camel baseball cap I'm wearing, you think it's totally Donald Trump fan, but I'm just messing. I'm just messing with the YouTube algorithm, right? I am totally not a fan of Donald Trump, but I'm just like, I'm not a fan of any politician, and it's just like, if I was in the US and I had to vote, I had to choose between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and I said this years ago, it's like choosing between, being shot with a 45 in your left or your right foot, and you're like, really, it's not like your left and your right hand, right? That's more of a like. If you're right-handed, you definitely need your right hand more. No, it's your feet. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna suck either way. But like, I report on him so much because the media is the rest of all of my colleagues, especially in the light median, as we say in Germany, the leading media, the legacy press, you might call them. They are so biased against Donald Trump that I always feel like I have to, correct the record, and that makes me sound like I'm a fan of Donald Trump, which I really am not. But I'm just trying to analyze what he did. I think I never thought his adversarial relationship with the media was smart. That is never smart when you're in public office. Like, it's never smart to fuck up the press. Fuck off the press. Take it out from a journalist. It's not good. It's always better if you're like on friendly terms with the press. But having done that, I completely understand what he did. And I actually understand some of his points. Like, the mainstream media, especially in the US, is horrible. And I've talked about this on the show a lot. It's very biased, and it's just doing sloppy reporting all over, especially when comes to Donald Trump. I mean, it starts with like, fact-checking stuff. Was it New York Times with like the 100 lies of Donald Trump, and they're like not lies. Everything they listed wasn't a lie in the in the actual sense of the word. When you're a journalist, you should know what the word lie means, right? Which is not to say that the stuff he said was correct, right? But if you say somebody lied, especially as a journalist, you have to prove it, right? Saying that somebody lies implies intent. And to prove intent is pretty hard. If you've ever been to a murder trial, it is extremely hard. And as a journalist, you should adhere to these same standards as they do in courts, right? You shouldn't say somebody lied if you can't specifically prove that they did, i.e. that they intended to say something that wasn't true. And with Donald Trump, it's like twice as hard as with other people, because the guy is crazy. Like, you don't know. You just, like, when he says something off the wall, you look at the guy and you think like he might actually believe that. And then it wouldn't be lying. Then it would just be derangement. And yeah, so, but it starts with that. It goes on to all the other stuff, the Hunter Biden laptop, just believing incredible shit from the Steele dossier where you're like, I mean, Donald Trump is crazy and an idiot, but like he's not that crazy, right? It's just that doesn't sound like him. But because everybody's biased against him, you have to kind of they always just believed everything. So it's no wonder with the press doing all this shit that he just went straight to Twitter. He was like, fuck you guys, I'm just going to talk to people directly. Now, obviously, then they wanted to get him off. Now, the interesting thing about this is all of this I said when it happened. The thing we didn't know when they kicked Trump off, off Twitter, which is the important thing about this Twitter files business we're talking about today, is how it happened and how ridiculous it was internally from Twitter. Now, everything I'm going to talk about today in this, because this is a very early installment of the Twitter files, comes with a caveat, which is stuff I already talked about on the show and they discovered later in the Twitter files. When this came out, they thought this was specific to Twitter. And it's in some respects specific to Donald Trump. They then figured out later, in later installments of the Twitter files, once they dug deeper in those documents, that Elon Musk had kind of, in an act of being the first billionaire whistleblower, released to journalists, they then figured out that they did this to all kinds of people. And like later on, people you would just call normal people. They did this to private citizens, but also to like researchers during, the pandemic, to politicians, to other politicians, to all kinds of people. They did the same visibility filtering, sticking idiotic labels on tweets and later even banning their accounts, as they did to Donald Trump. And we then later figured out, Matt Taibbi, Schallenberger, and his colleagues Barry Weiss and I think Li Fong was part of this. They all figured out that it wasn't even Twitter. This whole thing is like we thought it was just specific to Twitter, or they thought that at the beginning as well. But it's a whole what they're now calling the censorship industrial complex, which is something I'll definitely do an episode about that when they, about later Twitter files. But, to establish all of that, I thought it would be important to get into this, first to talk about how, Trump got banned, because this is kind of like this is the thing that cracked the case wide open. This is where people really started to pay attention. I mean, there were so-called air quotes conspiracy theories about people getting visibility filtered on Twitter for years. And Twitter always said, no, we don't do this. And the tech person was like, yeah, it's just conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, the people who were visibility filtered were like, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is happening to me. I can speak from experience there. I think I still am, even though whatever Musk promised, I'm obviously not important enough to be one of the accounts that has been reviewed. But yeah, so I think this is very important. So when it happened to Trump, people started paying attention. So let's start with this. I think this is Matt Taibbi writing in the beginning here. Whatever your opinion on the decision to remove Trump that day, the internal communications at Twitter between January 6th and January 8th, that's 2021, have clear historical import. Even Twitter's employees understood in the moment it was a landmark moment in the annals of speech. As soon as they finished banning Trump, Twitter executives started processing new power. They prepared to ban future presidents and White Houses and perhaps even Joe Biden. And this is the important thing, right? So here's this is all like from internal Slack messages at Twitter at the time, where somebody asked, is this the first sitting head of state to ever be suspended? And this is, to me, I think, the beginning of a new era. This is when when suddenly a private company has been given the power, has been given a new kind of power that they can exert over their own government. And this is, I mean, don't mistake this. This is the internal management of a private company that decided to censor, an official communication channel, maybe the most important, of their own head of state, of the president of the United States. This is very important. And this is not at all important because it's Donald Trump. I don't care about Donald Trump. It's because it's the president of the United States. And because a precedent has been established here. And no matter what political persuasion you are, if you think about this and just divorce, the unfortunate thing about Donald Trump is that they can get all kinds of precedents rammed through on the basis that it's Donald Trump and nobody really likes him. But you have to divorce yourself from the notion that this is Trump. Because, I mean, let's say you're a Democrat. Let's say you're in the US, you love Joe Biden, you're a lifelong Democrat. This is still important because this is a precedent now. And this is something that, let's say there's a Democratic president in power and Twitter, for whatever reason, I mean, people think this is unlikely, so they think this will never happen, but it will, because things change. The communication channel might not even be Twitter, but like the privately owned communication channel that at that time is the most important to communicate with your voters, like the Democratic president uses to communicate with their voters, be it TikTok, I don't give a fuck, whatever it is, right? That is in control of Republicans at the time. They can now cut your president off. And that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing for society, right? Because all the arguments that these Twitter people use, and I said this on the show, I said this very early on, I think I said this when they first started talking about banning Trump. I said, this is idiotic because their arguments are he's such a bad man. He's, orange man bad. He's like inciting violence, whatever. He's a fascist or whatever. Like, if that is the case, let's assume you are correct and that is the case. Your problem is not that the fascist president of the United States has a platform on Twitter. That's not your problem. Your problem is that your current president is a fascist. If that is true, maybe that's what you should solve, right? Kicking him off Twitter creates all kinds of other problems, free speech problems, like just problems with what can civil society do, like what rights does the head of state have, all of this. But it doesn't solve your problem if Donald Trump's your problem. I've never, on that basis, all of their arguments that they're going to use in this, in Twitter internally are bullshit. Because if your issue is that the sitting president is inciting a revolution in your own country, that is basically the theory that Twitter people at January 6th are internally advancing. If your sitting president, because he lost the election and there's a new president coming in, is inciting a revolution inside your country, your solution is not to ban him off Twitter. He's the president. He can hold a press conference if he wants. It's not like you're preventing this guy from getting the news out. He's going to assemble the press corps and he's going to, he can call up any newspaper in the United States or anywhere in the world and say, good day to you. Hello, I'm Donald Trump. I really can't do his voice, but I'm Donald Trump and I have a message for you. Would you please publish this? Right? And they will, because he's the president of the United States. As Matt Taibbi keeps pointing out with all this like misinformation shit and like, the New York Times published the fucking Unabomber manifesto. You can't get worse. You can't go, oh, we're not publishing this address by the president because it's like inciting violence. You published the fucking Unabomber manifesto. and defended it ever after because, free speech and whatever. And you were doing a good thing because he was going to stop sending bombs to people. Like, what the fuck? These arguments are bullshit. But anyway, so this is very important. And like, as I said before, the problem here is, the problem here from the beginning is that obviously this happened to Trump, aka the evil orange man. It would have been okay if it wouldn't have been gone down if it happened to anybody else. But because it's Trump, it's now the new normal. Anyway, continuing here with Meta EBS, the election approached senior executives, perhaps under pressure from federal agencies with whom they met more as time progressed, increasingly struggled with rules and began to speak of VIOs as pretext to do what they'd likely have done anyway. After J6, internal Slacks, that is Slack communications, I guess, showed the wording of this shit because he had to publish this on Twitter. It's not good writing. Internal Slacks show Twitter executives getting a kick out of intensified relationships with federal agencies. And that's something we're going to get into later because, at first they thought it was only the FBI, kind of basically manipulating Twitter and manipulating the discourse. We later learned that it was all social media sites and even some, that some sites that you wouldn't even classify as social media, like Wikipedia, that had meetings with intelligence services, and not only the FBI. I mean, in this case, it's the FBI, I think Department of Homeland Security, and the office of the there's like the office of the president. There's like a presidential thing. I've actually forgotten. Anyway, intelligence services. They're pretty much all the same. The United States have so many you can't keep them straight. It's like, what is it, 19 now? I think doesn't the Department of Energy has its own intelligence service? It's just bonkers over there. And one thing you have to also keep in mind when talking about this today, of course, there's still debate about this. And I think there was there's just a court case in the Supreme Court in the US right now about all of this, where like the people who defend this kind of censorship say, well, it wasn't really censorship because these companies weren't forced, right? And they weren't coerced, which is bullshit. If you're the company and like the FBI, which, in the German press is often referred to as the federal police of the United States, because in Germany we have a federal police. The difference is in Germany, the federal police is a police agency. It's not an intelligence service. The FBI is something very different from a normal police force. They have a lot more rights. They are under a lot less control. You just need to watch. And it's so amazing to me that people don't know this, like even Americans, but like even in Germany, I talk to people and like, FBI, blah, intelligence service. They're like, what do you mean intelligence service? I'm like, have you ever watched any police procedural? Like bullshit like CSI. There's an episode where the local police is investigating a murder. And the FBI shows up because it's some interstate like bullshit. And then they take all like they pull jurisdiction. And then you always have this dialogue from the local police guy, the local homicide detective who explains to his partner who's new, why the FBI is bullshit, like, and how the FBI was started and why it was started. I mean, they don't really go that deep, but you can do, just look up J. Edgar Hoover. Just read the Wikipedia page for J. Edgar Hoover. This is what I always tell people. But anyway, so, but we later, of course, learned that this is way deeper. And the only reason, like, today, even in the Supreme Court, they say, well, it wasn't really coercion, and it's not really nefarious because the government does this all the time. To which I think Matt Taibbi on a recent podcast said something, that's really germane to this. He basically said, well, if this is all not a problem, why was it all secret? Why didn't we know about this shit? Twitter for years denied that they did any of this. Visibility filtering, blacklisting, shadow banning people. They denied this. And it wasn't like the FBI was publicly saying, hey, we're fighting misinformation and crime on Twitter by telling Twitter what tweets to delete and make it so that people can't see them. This was all done in secret. It was and I'm going to say it was a government conspiracy. This was a conspiracy. And I say that because it is the definition of a conspiracy. It is several government agencies in secret conspiring with a public company or several public companies against the public, right? The public didn't know about this. There were just random innocent people that got caught up in this. A lot of them were like, oh, the FBI goes, oh, these are Russian bot accounts. And then they just ban some guy, right? Some guy. And like Matt Taibbi did amazing writing about this. I cannot recommend Racket, which is his Substack, highly enough, because he did some amazing writing where like he did the thing a journalist would do. So there's some guy in the Twitter files, some random guy who like, I don't know, somebody FBI was like, oh, this is a Russian influenced bot. And they visibility filtered his account. So Taibbi goes and digs up the account and goes on the profile page and says, oh, well, this is a guy who runs the used car, used car dealership in, I don't know, Tennessee or whatever. I can't remember where exactly it was. I think in some southern state. And he rings him up. I mean, this is something Twitter could have done because they have all the data, but they didn't. They just shadow banned his account. Taibbi rings him up and goes, hey, I'm a journalist. Like, I got these materials from Twitter. They're saying you're a Russian bot. And the guy's like, no, I'm 52 years old. I got a wife and 3 kids. I live in Tennessee. So why do they think I'm a bot? And then Taibbi's, I don't know, he was talking about this. He's like, yeah, you tweeted like this and that. And he's like, yeah, it's because I thought that. It's ridiculous. So they got like normal people who had a political opinion that somebody didn't like, got caught up in this. So that's the public. That is the government and a private company doing shit behind the back of the public against the public. If that isn't a conspiracy, I don't know what a conspiracy is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, these conspiracy theorists, a lot of them are not jobs, but sometimes they get things right, and the more they get things right more often these days, because apparently there's just a lot more conspiracies going on. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, continuing here. There was at least some tension between safety operations, a larger department whose staffers used a more rules-based process for addressing issues like porn, scams, and threats, and a smaller, more powerful cadre of senior policy executives like Roth and Gaddy. The latter group were a high-speed Supreme Court of moderation, issuing content rulings on the fly, often in minutes and based on guesses, gut calls, even Google searches, even in cases involving the president. During this time, executives were also clearly liaising with federal enforcement and intelligence agencies about moderation of election-rated content. And people say, well, they're a private company. They can do whatever they want. When confronted with how they actually made these bullshit decisions. Just some guy who is in a powerful position at Twitter just Googling, going, I don't like this guy. That's bullshit. Let's ban him. Or let's visibility filter this account. And people say it's a private company, they can do whatever they want. Yeah, but it's not a flower shop around the corner where they go, oh, I don't like your face, I'm not going to sell you flowers. You just go to the next flower shop. You don't buy any flowers. That's not like an issue. That's not like an issue of societal impact. If you're talking about the most important information dissemination platform we have today, arguably the platform normal people use to use their right of speech, their to execute their given rights in a democracy, to espouse their opinion, their political opinion, then that's something very, very different. And the way they decide these things, as somebody who studied history, is, when Matt Taibbi talks about how they decided things in Twitter, is very familiar to me. If this was a government, we'd be calling this authoritarianism. This is how dictators in governments decide things. They have like rules, their laws, and then you can often tell, or almost always tell, an authoritarian, a totalitarian a government by the fact that the leader or the leaders will ignore the rules, like ignore the laws and the rules in favor of what they think is right or their gut feelings. This goes back to autocratic regimes in like classical times, like in antiquity. This is how medieval monarchs did shit. If you're Louis XIV and you're like, my words comes down from God. I do whatever I want. I don't care about these laws. This is how Hitler did things in Nazi Germany. This is how the Soviet Union did things. They had laws, but if Stalin thought, we'd rather do this, then the laws didn't count for anything. And this might be heavy-handed to you because we're just talking about the company and they can do whatever they want. But my question is, if we do not accept this from a government, why is it okay when a private company does it? And especially, if any company does it, well, that's one thing. But if they were in charge of something very important, if they were in charge of the for example, in Germany, the rail network is privatized, right? There's a private company that is in charge of the rail network, which in my opinion is a mistake, but all right, that's the way they did things in the 90s. It used to be government, now it's private company. If they start behaving like this, like an authoritarian government would, they make rules, and then if they don't like these rules, they just ignore them. There'd be public outcry for good reason. And Twitter, I would argue, is the same thing. It's a utility, especially at the point we're talking about. I mean, today, lots of people off Twitter, people don't like Twitter. Elon Musk is the new orange Batman, whatever. All right. But like, we're talking 2020, 2021. During this election, this was the most important communication platform there was. Like, this should have been a utility and should be treated as such, I feel. And then there's here, Taibbi explains this more. This post about the Hunter Biden laptop situation shows that Roth not only met weekly with the FBI and DHS, but also with, here we go, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, DNI. That was the other intelligence service I forgot about. And, he's this is like a Slack message. Hacked materials. This is Joel Roth, who was in charge of this at Twitter at the time. Hacked materials exploded. We blocked the New York Post story. Then we unblocked it, but said the opposite. Then said we unblocked it, and now we're in a messy situation where our policy is in shambles. Comms' angry reporters think we're idiots, and we're refactoring an exceedingly complex policy 18 days out from the election. In short, fuck my life. Weekly sync with FBI, DHS, DNI. Re-election security. The meeting happened about 15 minutes after the aforementioned hacked materials implosion. The government declined to share anything useful when asked. Monthly meeting with FBI, FITF. Briefed on several ongoing investigations. So this guy was they had weekly meetings with intelligence services. You can't tell me that's normal, especially for a social media company. I mean, this shows you how important Twitter was at the time. I don't know, but I think it would be a good guess to say that he probably had more meetings with intelligence services than companies that are working for like building weapon systems for the military, right? I don't know that people at Raytheon have weekly meetings with the FBI or like the military, whatever, the Defense Intelligence Agency or whoever's in charge of that kind of shit. Like this is, to me, this is a conspiracy. Now, one interesting side note about this is there's also a lot of like funny stuff in this. For example, these people, they strike. These people are working at Twitter at this. They, you think about these Silicon Valley nerds or whatever, but they feel like these humorless bureaucrats. They could be working in a Kafka story. It's very German. I feel they're like, they have about the sense of humor of somebody who works for a German government office. So, for example, there was a famous case. In one case, former Arkansas governor Mike Huckabee joke tweets about mail-in ballots for his, quote, deceased parents and grandparents. So the tweet is a picture of Mike Huckabee. He has a "I voted in Walton County" sticker on his shirt. And he writes, obviously a Republican, he writes, "Stood in rain for hour to early vote today. When I got home, I filled in my stack of mail-in ballots and then voted the ballots of my deceased parents and grandparents. They vote just like me. Hashtag Trump 2020. This inspires a long Slack that reads like a parody. I agree it's a joke, concedes the Twitter employee, but he's also literally admitting in a tweet a crime." Like, you read this and these people, I mean, yeah, we can talk about him using the word literally there. That would be one thing. Like, he didn't even say he's this is a joke and he's admitting a crime. He's literally admitting a crime. No, he's not, because you just said it's a joke. If it's a joke, he's not admitting a crime, right? If I'm a comedian on stage and I make a joke about killing my wife, it's obvious that it's a joke. I'm not admitting to a crime. Aside from the fact that I didn't kill my wife, right? You cannot admit to a crime that you haven't committed. I mean, you can, but it's not a crime. There's no crime. If I right now say I killed my wife this morning, which I didn't because she's at work right now, right? You can't say that is admitting to, I mean, it is like on a semantic basis, I guess it's admitting to a crime, but more like if you use terms like literally, what he's literally doing is he is literally admitting to a crime he didn't commit, which is probably a joke. How, like, I mean, it's just a Slack. It's people typing in the Slack at work, but like, this is their job. Doing this is their job. Their job is to look at tweets and then judge if they violate Twitter's terms of, or was their job. I think they're all fired under Musk for good reason. Like, and good riddance. These idiots. I mean, you're an idiot. Your job is to judge if a tweet is like illegal. And you can't, because you don't understand that making a joke about something that's illegal is not actually illegal. You know, you have to commit the crime first. I mean, okay, this is changing now, I admit, because these idiots are now apparently also in politics and in the legislature, and we now actually have laws, I think in the US and also in Germany, where things that would never have been a crime when sane people were making the laws are now a crime. Like, you know, things like hate crimes where you're saying something, your only crime was saying something, and then that is being treated as if you actually hurt somebody, which is a very different thing, really. Just from my experience from last night, again, to bring that up, if you think that words hurt, right, you should just go to your nearest Muay Thai gym and say, I want a training session. You know, you don't even have to do sparring. Just do the warm-up workout, right? And if you're not incredibly fit, that will hurt you a lot. And then you realize, you know, words really don't hurt. What hurts is doing 150 burpees when you're not used to it. That fucking hurts. Never mind getting hit by somebody or getting your shin kicked, you know. If you ever have gotten an inside leg kick without leg protectors, then you know what hurts. This shit doesn't hurt. And this is not a crime. It's a fucking joke. It's a dumb joke. It's not funny, right? Especially when you have it's not in good taste, when you have a discussion about how the election might be fraudulent, how there is fake voting in the election, which happens. I did my second episode on this show. This was about electronic voting, but I talked about the election system in the US is fucked. They have serious problems. We have enough problems as it is in Germany, but in the US, fuck it. There has been actual fraud in the last, I don't know how many elections. There's been all kinds of bullshit. Just remember the hanging chads, that word. I didn't even know what a fucking chat was. I thought, before this, I think this predates the chat meme even. But it's what the fuck is going on? You have, so it's not funny. It's not a good joke. It's in poor taste, but it is a joke. It is a joke. The group declares Hux an edge case. And though one notes, quote, "We don't make exceptions for jokes or satire," end quote, they ultimately decide to leave him be because, quote, "We've poked enough bears." So the only reason why they didn't sanction this guy was because they were afraid of the backlash, to be honest. We don't make exceptions for jokes or satires. Well, you fucking should. Have you ever heard about I don't even know what the English term is in Germany. It's Kunstfreiheit, freedom of the arts, right? Any democracy has this. Right? Any democracy gives its citizens the right to make fun of people, make fun of the government in art. You have the right to make outrageous statements. It's just, that's part of speech, freedom of speech. Without that, we're fucked. Without that, society is fucked. But these people don't understand that. They think people have a right to be offended. They don't think people have a right to offend other people. And it's actually that way around. You have the right to offend other people. There are limits to that, especially in countries like Germany, where you can actually go to jail for offending people, which I always thought was ridiculous. But okay. But, generally, it's that way around. You certainly don't, well, not yet, I guess. I guess this is changing because there's too many idiots anywhere. Quote, could still mislead people, end quote, the humor-averse group declares, before moving on from Huckabee. Roth suggests moderation, even in this absurd case, could depend on whether or not the joke results in, quote, confusion. This seemingly silly case actually foreshadows serious issues later. Yeah, no shit, because these people are idiots. Of course people could be confused by a joke. Of course. Yeah. There are very dumb people out there. There are people who believe everything you tell them. But that doesn't mean we need to protect against that. That is their fucking fault. I saw, I don't know, I think it was from a Joe Rogan comedy special. I just watched a clip of this recently, where he's talking about dumb people, and he says one of the problems in our society is that we nerfed corners and sharp edges, right? So dumb people just survive. They get protected by the safety net of society, and so which is okay. I'm okay for dumb people to survive. The problem is that they breed too much, but that's they're human beings. They have that right. But it's this is one of the problems. We can't we might protect them like that, but we can't. You can't tailor your communication platform to okay, these guys work in an executive role at a communications company. Have they never done any basic communications stuff? These guys, I bet you they have university degrees, right? I don't. I still did some basic communication theory in university. And the first thing you learn is that any communication goes wrong. It goes wrong all the time, right? There's misunderstandings everywhere in human in the exchange, in communication, like body language gets misunderstood, words get misunderstood. People misunderstand each other all the time. That is the basic tenet of, like, if you're trying to communicate as a journalist or as a PR person, it doesn't matter. As an author, you have to be as specific with your language as you can, and you still have to assume that people will misunderstand you. That's like the first thing that happens. Like if you're a journalist, 95% of the angry comments I get on things I do, on this podcast, on things I write, is people who misunderstood me. And quite often I go back and, if I get a dialogue going, if they write me an email or whatever, and they actually write back, quite often these people come around, right? They might not come around to my viewpoint, and that's not the point, but they will go like, oh, I was upset there, but actually I now understand that I misunderstood you. And sometimes it's my fault, sometimes it's their fault. It's, sometimes it's on both sides. It's just how human interaction works. But like, what? Like, you can't, if you're working at Twitter and you're doing communications at Twitter and you're like, oh, this could be misunderstood. Like, if your goal is that nothing that is on Twitter is misunderstood, you have to shut it down. Any communications platform. If your goal is no misunderstanding, shut it all down. Pass laws that people are not allowed to talk anymore because they will get misunderstood. In the docs, executives often expanded criteria to subjective issues like intent. Yes, a video is authentic, but why was it shown? Orientation. Was the banned tweet shown to condemn or support? Or reception? Did the joke cause confusion? This reflex will become key in J6. So, intent. How do you, like I talked about this before, this is the Donald Trump light. Like, somebody who works at Twitter, there's a video. How do you judge? I mean, you can judge intent, but it probably won't be right. Like, how would you know? How would you know what somebody's intent was? I mean, even if they say what their intent was, they might be lying. It is like, these people have these people are dumb. And it's amazing to me because they have, all of them are high, like I think Roth is a lawyer. I think he has a law. Like, these people have degrees. So apparently today you can get a degree by being an idiot. Which probably shouldn't surprise me, but I guess that's the case. Like if you have a basic understanding of anything, you know that like murder is in most legal jurisdictions is separated from like manslaughter by intent. And if you ever seen like a police TV show, you read a book, you've seen like a legal show, you know that it is very hard to prove intent. This is why a lot of murderers actually get like manslaughter. Like while the DA will often downgrade murder charges to manslaughter charges because they're like, we can't prove intent in this case. Or it would be very hard. Like in the US, you'd have to convince a jury that was intent. Like in Germany, we don't have juries, but we have like lay judges, and you have to convince the judge as a DA that was intent, and that is hard. Like in some cases, it's obvious, right? For example, there's a murder case I once researched where some guy killed, so his wife had an affair, and he killed the guy, he shot the guy she had an affair with, right? And he got jailed for murder, and the reason why is because he told the guy she was having an affair with to meet him to discuss this, like on some, in a forest, on some forest path. Like, already the guy who got shot here, probably not the smartest person, like, right? You meet in a public place, you idiot. But right, okay. So they meet, and the husband pulls the gun and kills him. And later on, he was arguing, I think this was like emotion, in an emotional state, so which is a typical thing in Germany, where it's called im Affekt. It's like in the moment. If you kill somebody in the moment, it's usually manslaughter, because you can't meditate killing somebody in like an emotional rage. But the judge was, this is clearly murder, because he obviously lured the guy to this place where he could kill him to get away with it. So there was intent. Like, he lured him there with the intent to kill him. So this proves intent. So sometimes you can prove it, but in most cases, it's like, it's very hard, and it takes it there in court like hours and hours and hours, just evaluating every little detail and just dancing around each other. Like, how do you not know this? Like, how do you get a degree in university without understanding this? I have no idea. So then we had, of course, there was also like, this was before J6, this was when the election was going on. There's also more stuff about the election being fraudulent, and this one's less humorous. Here, the FBI sends reports about a pair of tweets, the second of which involves a former Tippecanoe County, Indiana. That's a great name, by the way. Tippecanoe County, Indiana councilor and Republican, named, claiming between 2 and 25% of ballots by mail are being rejected for error. So the tweet is a guy called John Basham saying, editorial, the Democrats are in complete panic as their massive push for vote by mail is backfiring on them. Two things are unfolding. One, an unexpected number of registered Republicans are returning ballots. Two, between 2 and 25% of ballots by mail are being rejected for errors. And there's like photos of like mail-in ballots on the ground somewhere next to a trash can, I think. The group then decides to apply a learn how voting is safe and secure label, because one commenter says it's totally normal to have 2% error rate. Roth then gives the final go-ahead to the process initiated by the FBI. Now, as I said, the American voting system is in shambles. I did an episode about this, link in the show notes, privatecitizen.press. But initially, my reaction was, wow, they think 2% is acceptable, like an acceptable like number for like error rate for an election. And then I was like, so what is the error rate, let's say in the German federal election? And I figured out, I mean, we do lots more mail-in voting. Mail-in voting in Germany has been the de facto standard for years. So I looked it up. In the federal election of 2017, apparently 74.3% of people, so almost half of all voters voted by mail. Now, I thought, well, this is a pretty secure and easy system. So I found a scientific paper by some political scientists who found out or talking about that the rate in Germany is even higher. It might be even up to 4%. It's hard to figure out because the government doesn't publish numbers on this, but they did a study on this. And they argue that the government should be more transparent because they are saying that this is not normal because in in-person voting, the error rate is a lot lower. And they think this is a problem because the authors of this paper, they're arguing, the public should be made aware of that. And then I thought, well, this kind of doesn't invalidate my argument because it's kind of what this Indiana guy did. That's kind of what he wanted to do. He is raising awareness of like errors. But then the FBI goes to Twitter and says, well, you got to do something about this. And Twitter puts a label on that says, well, voting by mail is safe. But, not according to researchers who say, well, it's not as safe as going there in person. At least in Germany. And in Germany, I would suggest maybe the error rate in the US is higher, just based on anything else I know about the election system. And we've been doing this for a long time in Germany. I mean, talking like I've been voting since I think I voted the first time when I was 17. When I was 17, they had like this thing in the local elections, you could vote with 16. So when I was 17, I think this was 99, or 2000, I voted for the first time, and I actually went to the polling place. And ever since then, ever since like 2000 or like, in the last 24 years, 25 years, I voted in every single election I could vote in, which is in Germany. I wasn't allowed to vote in Australia, obviously, and in the UK neither. And all of these, except the first time, were all mail-in ballots. I've only used mail-in ballots, which I think generally I thought is a good compromise between the tedium of having to go to a polling place and waiting there and all that, and the idiocy that is electronic voting, which is, if you go back to that second episode, I explain why that is just an hilariously dumb idea. But anyway, so to me, this is a legit concern. I mean, he's overselling it a bit with the 25%, I guess, but like, this is not something that should be censored. And why is the FBI, like the FBI is a intelligence service and a police force that is allegedly there to catch hardcore criminals, right? They are supposed to fight organized crime, like drug cartels and gangs and, serial killers and murderers by hire and weapon smugglers and drug smugglers and all this kind of shit. That's what they're supposed to do. Why do they have a department that interfaces with internet and social media companies and tells them to censor politicians? Right? In secret. Right? They didn't tell this John Basham guy about this. Nobody did. And that's what makes it so insidious. And that's why it's a problem. If it was in public and the public went, okay, yes, we want this, it would still be wrong and detrimental to democracy. Don't get me wrong on that, but it wouldn't be as bad because it wouldn't be a conspiracy. That is a problem. So what becomes clear here is they get this power. Twitter, even in the run-up before banning Trump, the people inside Twitter get this power, and they get used to this power, and they get used to just willy-nilly deciding things. Like, in most cases, they know what they're doing is wrong, but they do it anyway. In the documents, so with the documents, they mean the ones from the Twitter files here. Executives often expand criteria to subjective issues like intent. We talked about that. In another example, Twitter employees prepare to slap a mail-in voting a safe warning label on a Trump tweet about a postal screw-up in Ohio before realizing the events took place, which meant the tweet was factually accurate. Trump was being visibility filtered as late as a week before the election. Here, senior executives didn't appear to have a particular violation, but still worked fast to make sure a fairly anodyne Trump tweet couldn't be replied to, shared, or liked. So that they even do this when they figure out that Trump's actually saying the truth, telling the truth. But that doesn't matter because the intent is what, apparently the nebulous intent. So this is a theme that will continue throughout the whole censorship industrial complex. They always talk about they want to get rid of misinformation. I read news today that the German interior minister, who is an idiot, because the whole government's made up of idiots, but she's now creating like a task force to fight misinformation. And they always talk about misinformation, but when the Twitter files actually gave us a look into what they were actually doing, you did figure out that they were quite often, especially during the pandemic, censoring factual information. And it wasn't even they didn't knew it was fake. They know, like in this case, like Twitter, they know it's factual. They censor it anyway because it's not convenient. Twitter in 2020 at least was deploying a vast range of visible and invisible tools to rein in Trump's engagement long before J6. The ban will come after other avenues are exhausted. Before the riots, the company was engaged in an inherently insane or impossible project, trying to create an ever-expanding, ostensibly rational set of rules to regulate every conceivable speech situation that might arise between humans. This project was preposterous, yet its leaders were unable to see this, having become infected with groupthink, coming to believe sincerely that it was Twitter's responsibility to control as much as possible what people could talk about, how often, and with whom. And this is exactly the problem. When you think you're in a scientific mindset and you think you're rational, but you're doing something that is insane, right? You're trying to have these rational rules, but it doesn't work because your premise is idiotic, right? This reminds me of, I mean, you can people are playing the drinking game. How often does Fab go to the Nazi example? Can now take a large drink, but it does remind me of like this Nazi pseudoscience where they're like, okay, you can measure people's heads and then you can figure out what race they are, right? They had all like these scientific explanations, but the premise was absolutely shit. I like bullshit. And some people realized, others probably didn't, but like it makes the whole card house you're building, you're erecting on top of this completely like idiotic because you're building it on quicksand. Or like the Soviet Union did the same thing. Like there was this biologist who came up with this whole like communist explanation of what was it? I think it was evolution, which was like completely bullshit. It was like a politically based basis for like this scientific construct, which that's literally not how science works. Like science doesn't care about politics or anything. Science cares about, you do an experiment and then you're like, oh yeah, or you think very hard and then the best idea is the one that sticks around because it's obviously the best idea. It doesn't care about what the government says or, what party you're from or if this idea helps Donald Trump or it doesn't. But these people all think like that. And that's what makes them so repulsive to me, I think. I've only recently, like the more I envelop myself in the Twitter files, the more I realize this. It's the same repulsion I get when I read like a Hitler biography or a Stalin biography, which are often, a lot of them are not about the person itself. And I'm not talking about Hitler or Stalin. I'm talking about the apparatus they built, like the bureaucrats, like the people in the Politburo and all these people. They have the same way of thinking as these people you read about in the Twitter files. They are convinced they're doing the right thing, but they're doing it on an ideological basis that corrupts everything. And these people had the I'm sorry, I need more coffee. These people had the ideological basis of thinking that they just assumed that you need to control people's speech to make the world better. And everything they base on this turns into shit because that foundation for their thinking itself is flawed. It misunderstands how human beings work and it misunderstands how democracy works. And so it doesn't work. And what's also amazing is like the mental gymnastics these people have to go through to combine like how they think the world works, and then they get data from how the world actually works. And if they were open-minded and not so ideologically blinded, they would see that their thinking is flawed, but they don't. So they have to kind of like integrate those facts that can't be integrated in their mind, and they have to go through all these weird mental hoops, which probably stresses you out. Like lots of these people are always like depressed, and I think that's why. Because it's like it's really hard on your brain if you have to do that all day. Like if your internal understanding of the world's very different from what you see outside your window, but to maintain your sanity, you have to kind of integrate that all the time. It's like a nightmare. And yeah, so now, January 6th approaches, unfolds, and because all of the visibility filtering, all of that wasn't enough, Trump still has followers that retweet him and agree with him. They now decide they have to ban him. The little petty bureaucrats in this capitalistic machine decide they will now have to censor the democratically elected sitting president of their own country. At 2:39 p.m. PST on January 2021, a comms official asked Roth to confirm or deny a story that they restricted Trump's ability to tweet. Roth says, "We have not." Minutes later, Roth executed the historic act of bouncing Trump, that is, putting him in timeout. "I hope you are appropriately corpsec'd," says a colleague, as if Trump would go and kill him, right? And if these people, as if Twitter corporate security could protect you. If the president, do you know anything about history? All the shit the CIA has done, like all the people they've killed in other countries, as if Twitter corporate security could protect you from this bullshit. And these people, they think they're doing the right thing. So I truly believe that is one of the key points in this whole, not only at Twitter, in this whole societal change or what we are witnessing in society today. Like these people they have good intentions. They think they're doing the right thing. They're just, their brain is not up to it. Or they're so captured by ideological ideas that they can't understand that what they're actually doing is kind of the opposite of what they're trying to do. And also, there was incredible pressure on these people, right? There's pressure by government. Like Twitter in the beginning had the right idea, but then there was like lots of pressure from the government, intelligence services, the press, their own misguided employees. So in the end, they just ignored their own principles and caved. Let's go through this a little bit and recap that. So for years, Twitter had resisted calls to ban Trump, but after the events of January 6th, the internal and external pressure from Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey grows. Former First Lady Michelle Obama and tech journalist Kara Swisher and others, many other publicly call on Twitter to permanently ban Trump. Dorsey was on vacation in French Polynesia the week of January 4th to 8th. He phoned into meetings, but also delegated much of the handling of the situation to senior executives. Vijaya Gadde, and this is Joel Roth. So, of course, Kara Swisher was part of Kara Swisher, one of probably the worst tech journalist of all times. It cracked me up. One time, Adam Curry on No Agenda played like the clip. So at the Apple event where Steve Jobs introduces podcasting to the world. So podcasting, Adam Curry, together with what's his face, the guy who invented the RSS thing. Damn, I forgot this. Oh my god, I'll have to look this up. Inventors podcasting. Dave Weiner, right? So Adam Curry kind of came up with the concept, and Dave Weiner developed the whole, like the RSS extension, the protocol to kind of the embedding of media files into RSS. Anyway, so Steve Jobs introduces this to the world because they've built this into the iPad. Jesus, this was way before into the iPod. We're talking the original iPod, the one that was basically a hard drive, right? With that click wheel. I got one somewhere. Just don't remember where. The original iPod. Anyway, so he built that into iTunes so you could download podcasts on your iPod, which is why it's called podcasting, right? He introduces this to the world, and Kara Swisher is on stage because she's presenting this thing. And so Adam Curry played this because he plays, Steve Jobs plays an episode to show this. He plays the beginning of the Daily Source Code, which was Adam Curry's podcast at the time, like probably the earliest podcast. And Kara Swisher's reaction, I think because Adam Curry swears, because he's a bit edgy, he's an MTV guy, which is why I always liked him. She's like, oh, what? So Kara Swisher's like, what do you do if somebody says anything bad? Like, how do you, on TV that gets bleeped or whatever? So she's basically, Steve Jobs is introducing podcasts, this revolution in media, right? This freeing of the airwaves from the people who have gate-kept it, because they had the frequencies and they could do radio forever. Where this MTV DJ goes, freedom to the people. Everybody can do radio now. And you have this tech journalist, and her first reaction is, how do we censor this? How can you censor? What if somebody says something on there that I don't like? How do I censor this shit? Kara Swisher, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, no wonder she was on this train as well. Anyway, Jack Dorsey, who has since admitted, by the way, that this was a mistake. He has said, and I think this is 2022, he said, it was a business decision, it shouldn't have been, and we should always revisit our decisions and evolve as necessary. He's obviously not at Twitter anymore. I stated in that thread and still believe that permanent bans of individuals are directionally wrong. Of individuals. Not to mention of the president of the United States. But back then, he okayed this, of course. On January 7th, Jack emails employees saying Twitter needs to remain consistent in its policies, including the right of users to return to Twitter after a temporary suspension. Around 11:30 a.m. PT, Roth DMs his colleagues with news that he's excited to share. Guess what? He writes, Jack just approved repeat offender for civic integrity. The new approach would create a system where 5 violations or strikes would result in permanent suspension. The colleague wants to know if the decision means Trump can finally be banned. The person asks, does the incitement to violence aspect change that calculus? Roth says it doesn't. Quote, Trump continues to have his one strike remaining, that is. So, Roth's colleagues' query about incitement to violence Roth's colleagues' query about, quote, incitement to violence heavily foreshadows what will happen on the following day. On January 8th, Twitter announces a permanent ban on Trump due to the, quote, risk of further incitement of violence by the president of the United States, who could just have a press conference. I mean, he doesn't even need he just needs to come out of the White House, go to the lawn, and everybody will be there. The press will be there. He's the president of the United States. He could probably sign an executive order that Twitter belongs to him now. I'm still, to this day, surprised that he didn't do that. Yeah. And then just to see what mental gymnastics these people did to justify in front of themselves and the world that they banned Trump. On J8, Twitter says its ban is based on, quote, specifically how Trump's tweets are being received and interpreted. So their ban is based on something they have no idea about. Like how would you know? Like, it'd be hard enough if you pick one person, right? If you say, okay, so what does Trump's tweet, how does that impact Fab? It'd be hard enough to know. But Trump has like millions of followers. How do you even know? Like, how do you even, do you statistically determine, like, if the question is, okay, Trump tweets something, right? And Twitter's like, okay, this is incitement to violence. And then you go, okay, he's got, 80 million followers. So we can ban him if the majority of these 80 million followers consider this incitement to violence. How would you figure that out? Like, you couldn't. It's impossible. This is insane. And the media went, yay, finally they banned Trump. Nobody in the media went, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how they're quoting criteria they cannot possibly even quantify, or like, how? But in 2019, Twitter said it did, quote, not attempt to determine all potential interpretations of the content or its intent. So in 2019, Twitter was still sane. After January 6th, Twitter employees organized to demand their employer ban Trump. Quote, there's a lot of employee advocacy happening, said one Twitter employee. In the early afternoon of January 8th, the Washington Post published an open letter signed by over 300 Twitter employees to CEO Jack Dorsey demanding Trump's ban. We must examine Twitter's complicity in what President-elect Biden has rightly termed insurrection. Which, by the way, wasn't an insurrection. Which now the U.S. Supreme, obviously it wasn't an insurrection, but okay, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled this now that wasn't an insurrection. One of the reasons being that you cannot have an insurrection by the sitting president, right? I mean, that's what you would call a coup from above. That's like a coup, right? If the president goes, okay, I've been voted out, I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to get the military to support me, and I'm going to pretend or prevent the parliament from meeting. Like, I'm gonna prevent the Senate or the House to meet, right? That's a coup. That's a military coup. That's not an insurrection. An insurrection is if the people rise up against the current government. The term insurrection is stupid anyway. I've never understood it. As far as I know, it's not a political science term. We usually call this a revolution. I think in the media in the US, they called it an insurrection because a revolution is a positive term in the Western world generally. The French Revolution, the American Revolution, which a revolution, let's be honest here, is never a positive thing. Like, the French Revolution was a positive thing in the long run for all of us because, we now have democracy because of that, or, the American Revolution, which kind of caused the French Revolution, whatever. But, but the actual French Revolution was horrible. They killed thousands of people. It destabilized countries so basically the Balkans, the hate and the murder and the death that is still going on in the Balkans and has been going on there for 100 years is essentially due to the French Revolution, right? A lot of the destabilization that happened in Europe happened because the existing democracies were disrupted. Which on a global basis, or even on a basis of the whole continent and of whatever followed, it was a good thing. But in itself, it's not a good thing. A revolution is never good. You don't want to be in a revolution. Believe me, it's not a good thing. Like, neither the American Revolution or the French Revolution, or a very good example is the Russian Revolution, is not a time you want to live through. It's not fun. There's a band called the Bourbon Boys, which I love. It's like fun country from Sweden. It's Halkov. The singer's Halkov from Raubtier. He does like his own music as Halkov. And they have a new album out. One song is called 4570 Govt. It has the amazing chorus. Because the 4570 Govt is the only government I trust. But it's fun bullshit, like country, hillbilly, rock, whatever. But like, here's it's a very true line in the song that says, everyone wants to be a rebel until it's time to do some rebel shit. Because when the shitstorm it ain't fun when the shitstorm starts and it isn't possible to quit or something like this. That is so true. Like, you know, today you look back and think like, the French Revolution was amazing for like democracy and everything. If you lived through that time, it's not a good thing. Anyway, insurrection wasn't an insurrection, because obviously it wasn't. Like, even on a semantic basis, it wasn't an insurrection. But it's Joe Biden. Like, what do you expect? The guy can't walk off a stage without shaking hands with imaginary people. I mean, but the Twitter staff assigned to evaluate tweets quickly concluded that Trump had not violated Twitter's policy. Well, no shit. I think we'd have a hard time saying this is incitement, wrote one staffer. Yeah, because it fucking wasn't. But Twitter executives didn't ban Trump, even though key staffers said that Trump had not incited violence, not even in a coded way. It did ban Trump, sorry. Less than 90 minutes after Twitter employees had determined that Trump's tweets were not in violation of Twitter policy, Vijaya Gadde, Twitter's head of legal policy and trust, asked whether it could in fact be coded incitement to further violence. Things escalated from there. Members of that team came to view him as a leader of a terrorist group responsible for violence and death comparable to the Christchurch shooter or Hitler. And on that basis, and on the totality of his tweets, she should be deplatformed. The Hitler comparison always. I mean, Trump's a lot of things. He's not like Hitler at all. Like, I'm not saying he's a good guy, or I would want him to be president, or I want him to be anything. But like, have these people seen a Hitler speech? Like, Hitler is the polar opposite of this guy. He's like happy-go-lucky in a mean way. Trump's like a comedian. Joe Rogan always calls him a comedian, and Joe Rogan knows a lot about comedians, and I think I agree. Trump's like a comedian. He's maybe not a good comedian, but he acts like a comedian. He acts a bit like Matt Taibbi called him the insane clown president. That's pretty close as well. He acts a bit like a clown. Hitler was like an intense, mean little gnome. And famously so, because there's this one recording of his actual voice that they did when he, I think it was Mannerheim's birthday. And he's like in a rail I blogged about this once. He's like, because the Finnish released this, he's like in a rail carriage in Finland. And some sound engineer just put a microphone on the hat rack and recorded like 45 minutes of Hitler talking to Mannheim. And he just talks like a human being. Like, we're in this like very like calm Bavarian accent, which he never, like in his speeches, he doesn't have a Bavarian accent, right? Because he was trying to play to the Prussian sympathies all the time. Even though he loved Bavaria and he actually was in World War I, the Austrian army didn't recruit him or didn't want to draft him, so he went to Bavaria and actually got drafted into a Bavarian regiment. But like he has this very calm voice. You're like, it's amazing. It's so different. You when you listen to that recording, you're like, shit, he was actually a human being. He talks like normal. He could be your neighbor. But like his public appearance obviously was very, very intense. Like the most intense speaker, probably almost up to his like the theatrics. There's also like famous photos of him practicing his like body language. Like Hitler was basically a WWE character. Like the thing you see on TV, that was all like, that was a character, right? He's like fucking Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's the Stone Cold Steve Austin of World War II. You can quote me on that. But like Trump is so very different. I don't understand. Anyway, not even to mention his Trump not having killed, I don't know, millions of Jews. I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing at that. That is actually not a laughing matter. Or millions of other people having caused a world war, But it's like these people, it's mental gymnastics. These people, I think, a little bit insane. These people who work for Twitter. So this is the tweet I think Trump got banned for. This is Donald Trump. The 75 million great American patriots, I can't do his voice, otherwise I would do his stupid voice. Great American patriots who voted for me, America first, and make America great again, will have a giant voice long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form. By the next day, employees expressed eagerness to tackle medical misinformation as soon as possible. Of course they did. So let's contrast that to some other world leaders who previously tweeted things and what Twitter did. In June 2018, Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei tweeted, Israel is a malignant cancerous tumor in the West Asian region that has to be removed and eradicated. It is possible and will happen. Twitter neither deleted the tweet nor banned the Ayatollah. In October 2020, the former Malaysian Prime Minister said it was a right for Muslims to kill millions of French people. Twitter deleted his tweet for glorifying violence, but he remains on the platform. I think this is in response to the terror attack in France at that concert. In October 2021, Twitter allowed Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to call on citizens to take up arms against the Tigray region. Twitter allowed the tweet to remain up and did not ban the Prime Minister. Because they're all not Donald Trump. There's literally heads of state on Twitter calling for actual violence. They're like, we need to take up arms and go over there and kill these people. And Twitter's like, that's okay. It's just some African dude. What do we care? What do we care what happens in Africa? But if it's the orange man and the orange man says, make America great again and the great patriots, and they need to march on the fucking Capitol, then that's like, need to ban him for that. There, of course, there's more examples. Let's not go into this. To end this, for what it's worth, we got to be fair. There were some people inside Twitter who knew this was shit and who spoke up, but only a few. The only serious concern we found, so this is the Twitter Files authors again. The only serious concern we found expressed within Twitter over the implications of free speech and democracy of banning Trump came from a junior person in the organization. It was tucked away in a lower-level Slack channel known as Site Integrity Auto. Quote, this might be an unpopular opinion, but one of ad hoc decisions like this that don't appear rooted in policy are IMHO, in my humble opinion, a slippery slope. This now appears to be a fiat by an online platform CEO with a global presence that can gatekeep speech for the entire world. Could have been me, that guy. He's also obviously well-spoken. I would agree with that. And then there also was another guy. Maybe because I'm from China, said one employee on January 7, I deeply understand how censorship can destroy the public conversation. Yeah, amen to that. And then, of course, we had the public reaction at the time. Outside the United States, Twitter's decision to ban Trump raised alarms, including with French President Emmanuel Macron, German Prime Minister Angela Merkel, and Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Macron told an audience he didn't, quote, want to live in a democracy where the key decisions were made by private players. Don't like Macron much, but he's right there. I want it to be decided by a law voted by our own representative or by regulation, governance, democracy, democratically discussed and approved by democratic leaders. Hey, hey, how about that? How about Macron speaking understandably here? I almost said truth to power, but he is the power. Merkel's spokesperson called Twitter's decision to ban Trump from its platform, quote, problematic. German understatement. And added that the freedom of opinion is of elementary significance. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who was killed earlier this year, allegedly killed, So rip on that account. Criticized the ban as, quote, an unacceptable act of censorship. Which it obviously was. And, based on, as we've seen, idiotic reasoning and based on secret pressure from intelligence services, which is weird. We'll get into that later, I guess, when we're talking about the industrial censorship complex. But like it's weird in a way because this was under Trump's government, right? This was organizations that are part of his government which didn't agree with him, specifically the FBI. There were obviously a lot of people in the FBI, we know, even from the time when he was elected, that objected to Trump being president, and in a quite anti-democratic sentiment, thought they had to do something about this. This doesn't surprise me from the FBI. It's an intelligence service, and people who work for intelligence services often are not very democratically minded. Kind of comes with the territory, because the whole, in a democracy, you have executive organs of the state. You have the Justice Department, you have the police, and these are all beholden to the public. They're beholden to the voter. They're not voted officials, at least not in Germany. Like, we don't vote a sheriff here like they do in the US. But these are part of the government, and they are under the same scrutiny that the government is. They have to publicize things. They're under scrutiny by the press. And the reason to have an intelligence service, especially outside of a time of war, there's other reasons why in times of war you have to have an intelligence service, obviously, but outside of the times of war, the main reason to have an intelligence service is that they're not beholden to the same checks and balances. In a democracy, they will have checks and balances. For example, in Germany, there is a kind of sitting group of parliamentarians, like in the parliament. They're like a special I don't know what they call that in the US. They have like these committees, I guess, like it's like a House committee, right? And they are there they get briefed on things the intelligence services do, and they are there to check on them. But famously, it's the same in the US, in the UK, in Germany. These people are always relatively pro law enforcement and pro intelligence service, and they often don't seem to check them very much. Anyway, the whole reason to have an intelligence service is to escape scrutiny of the public, right? The idea is that even in a democracy, the government has to do some things that the citizens should not know about for certain reasons. That's why you have an intelligence service. So it is significant that it's the FBI, right? And it's not, a police department, right? It's a lot harder to get away with shit when you're the LAPD than when you're the FBI. And that's why the FBI exists, to be frank. Why else would that just not be a police force, right? Why would they have intelligence service powers? Why can they do things and then not tell the public about it? And when a reporter asks, they just say, well, it's national security. Why are there these provisions in the Patriot Act? It's so the government can get shit done that they don't want the public to know about. That's just the way it is. And that might be there's an argument to have that might be justified in some ways. Like that when you're dealing with for example, organized crime that is organized on a level that and is funded on a level that exceeds governments. Like when you're dealing with Mexican cartels, right? Criminal organizations that have more money, more resources than often the countries they originate in. And they're operating in your country, and you want to deal with them, then there's there's an argument to be had that it's justified to have a service like this. I would say for them to have these powers, they need to produce results. And I personally would say, to me, the FBI, if their goal is to fight like the Medellin or the Sinaloa cartel, like they have outrun their welcome in a democracy, because they have all these special rules. Like they have all these things they can do, these weapons they can use. They can, FISA courts, they can fucking spy on people. And these cartels are still there. So they're obviously not doing their job very well. And they would always say, of course, we just need more of these extra extrajudicial powers. But I think that's a shit argument. I think they're just, I don't know, they're probably corrupt to a certain extent. They're doing shit like telling private citizens what they're allowed to say on Twitter instead of fighting the fucking drug cartels, apparently. Yeah, but that's enough of me ranting about this. Let's go and talk about some listener feedback I have received about my most recent, so the last episode. And this is from the forum thread of episode 165. That's the forum at Fab Industries. That's forum.fab.industries. But links are also in the show notes on the website for this podcast, privatecitizen.press, just to make it more complicated. And these are all from the forum. And once again, I appreciate everybody who comments on the show. Please let me know when you disagree with me. That is very important to me, and I love to have those discussions. So we have our first comment from my Russian friend and longtime listener, Yevgeny Kuznetsov, who once again challenges me with Russian words. And I didn't learn Russian in school because I'm from West Germany. We learned French, which I kind of failed to learn. But my French pronunciation is still a little bit, I can pronounce French words, at least passably, I think. Russian is hard. I did study linguistics, which makes me look up IPA pronunciation guides for everything. So I will try. Evgeny, please have mercy. Have mercy with this poor German podcaster. Evgeny says, so glad to be commuting with the Private Citizen again. Today I learned about how the fourth estate in English is all about those British estates and things in Russian, and as far as I know, in some other languages. It's Tetsvrche Vlast Tetsvrche Vlast. I think I got Vlast pretty much down. But I think it's Tetsvrche Vlast, literally the fourth power, and refers to the branches of government, the first three being legislative, executive, and judicial. Yeah, that's why I was confused, because in German I think it's the same way. In Russian sources, it's a common concept usually attributed to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which I think, yes, pretty much popularized it, although I haven't been able to find any direct quotes. I think he established the concept of these three estates, or the three power centers in a democracy. That for a society to be democratic, it's vital that three main branches of government are separated, so that no two powers are in the same hands and they balance each other neatly. Which, it's true, and it's amazing. You could have. It's pretty straightforward to come up with that after the 20th century and the fascist power grabs, especially in Germany, but to come up with before that, just the writing was on the wall. He saw what happens when we don't have that separation. I don't know if this separation of powers is actually required and or enough to make a democracy, but I know in today's Russia, all four branches are effectively in the same hands, and it doesn't look even close to a democracy here. Well, I don't know if it's required. I mean, democracy is not a label you stick or something, right? It's a description of a government, and it can be a parliamentary monarchy like the UK. It can be a republic, or like the US, or a federal republic like Germany. And you have a country. You can have countries which are totalitarian, autocratic rulerships, like the German Democratic Republic, which was called democratic, but wasn't at all. But there are certain things that you say for a country to be a proper democracy, a government system to be a proper democracy, that it has to fulfill. And usually it is said that the separation of these three powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, is one of them. Another one has to be plural. Like, that's not enough in itself, right? For example, you also have to have plurality in political parties, right? If it's like Eastern Germany, where you can vote, but there's only one party, or like China would be a contemporary example, then you do not have a democracy. And it's arguable. I don't know about the current situation in Russia, because everything I get here in Germany is basically Ukrainian and NATO propaganda on the subject. But yes, I would assume that the current system in Russia has these problems also, because I know that it had those before. Even before Putin, the whole transition from the Soviet Union to a democratic government in the US was problematic, and I think part of the fall of this falls to the US, who kind of propped up the oligarchs, I feel, in the 90s, instead of like facilitating a real transition to a stable democratic system. But I don't even know. Anyway, Yevgeny ends with arguably the press, or better yet, journalism, which is basically the body of journalism, is equally powerful and equally. When we say the press in this regard, I always mean television, radio, podcasts, YouTube, and bloggers. Is equally powerful and equally needs to be in separate hands. And I would completely agree with that. Now, the problem here is that this understanding of these estates, as in the legislative, executive, and judicial branch, being separate from each other, is concerns entities of the state, right? So if you take the press as the fourth estate in this, it would mean that, for example, the press is not in the hands or controlled by the government, as it was, for example, in the Nazi regime or in the Soviet regime. But that is not enough. I think we have learned that is also a problem. So if the press is in private hands, that would fulfill, basically Rousseau's thinking, right? His requirement for a democracy. But today we have this problem that if the press is in itself, if it's in private hands, so separate from the state, but there's only a few people who own all of the publishing places, then that's a problem. And that's definitely a problem, let's say that was on the horizon in the 90s. We've kind of solved this with the internet, because anybody can be part of the press. I was recently in a school and, talking to high school kids in grade 10 about journalism. And there were some students there who wanted to become journalists. And I talked to them directly. I said, whatever you do, if you really want to be a journalist, don't let anybody deter you from that, right? I explained the story how I, at university, universities have a radio station. I wanted to become a DJ on the radio station, and they didn't let me. Like, they didn't let me on the air. They were like, basically, you have to do like this for like 2 years, and then maybe you get a chance. And I was like, fuck that, I'm going to start a podcast. And the rest is history. And then I had a podcast at some point that it had a lot more listeners than university radio. It had a lot more listeners than actual radio in Germany at some point. Not in their prime time, but like, let's say in their normal day-to-day. I think Linux Outlaws had for a long time had more listeners than just the normal radio station here in West Germany would have. And that's the thing I told them. Like, if you want to write, and you go to a newspaper and they don't let you write, just get a blog and write. If you want to make movies and they don't, or like video journalism, and they don't let you on TV, which they probably won't if you don't look like a fucking model, then buy a camera, buy any camera, they'll do video, get a microphone, go out on the street, film some shit and upload it to YouTube. And that's journalism, right? So we kind of have solved that problem. The problem is that the entrenched legacy press is kind of fighting back, Substack's full of Nazis. Just because they're writing shit that you don't like, right? Sure, there might be some Nazis on there. There's probably Nazis in the legacy press. You just don't know, Anyway, following this, Astral C also commented, I ain't dead. Good to hear that, Fabian Weatherwax. Astral C, I tip my hat to you. You did recognize where I lifted that show title from. Granny Weatherwax. Your story about the car breaking down made me think that the next part will be that it burnt down, fell over, then sank into the swamp, like the Monty Python quote. Hope that the rest of the year will be better and the police is not after you because some other reasons, so you won't get Epstein like the Boeing whistleblower. I hope the rest of the year will also be better. Now the police is after me for some quite boring thing. They're also not really after me. And I've talked to a lawyer now. I will let you know. I will now have to give a statement, and then we will see. But it's boring. I promise you, it's boring. You'll laugh your ass off either way. And then also India Charlie also chimed in and also expressed happiness that the podcast is back on the airwaves. So yeah, I will give my best. I will endeavor that this stays this way. And with this, we get to the end of the show, which leaves me to thank everybody who's listened to this and is interested in what I'm doing, and especially those people who sent me feedback. And then I have to give a huge thanks to the people who actually support the show monetarily. As I said, I'm still working on a coffee thing. I'm working to set that up. Until then, you can become a member of my Patreon. If you go to privatecitizen.press, go to the show notes. It explains how to do that. And now I would like to thank the people that support this show. My executive producers, Butterbeans, Jaroslav Lichtblau, Michael Mullen-Jensen, Rizal, Sandman616, and Sergol Taran. I thank you all very much. You make this show possible. Supervising producers also make the show possible: Avis, Bennett Piata, Dave, IKN, Krunkle, and Tobias Weber. Producers: Andrew Davidson, Astral C, Cam, Captain Egghead, Dirk Didi, Fadi Mansour. Captain Egghead cracks me up. That's such a great username. Every time. It just makes me happy. Fadi Mansour, Florian Pigorsch, Joe Poser, Mr. Amish, RJ Tracy, and Robert Forster. And Mr. Amish also, I appreciate you listening to this show on your bamboo iPod or whatever the Amish use, or maybe you're hiding you're hiding a phone from the elders so you can listen to this. I applaud your courage. And also thanks to my associate producers, Johan Sonen, Kaisius, Ricky M, Steve Hose, and Vlad. All of you make the show possible. And I thank you very much. And I also have to thank Bytemark at bytemark.co.uk. Talking's a problem today. Maybe I did get hit in the head. Maybe I got knocked out yesterday and I can't remember. Bytemark.co.uk. They're providing the hosting and bandwidth for this show. And also thanks to Gegenwind Photography from Copenhagen for the amazing photo that I used for the album art. Those are some great guys. If you're ever in the vicinity and want some photos done, please contact them. They do amazing work. Also on weddings sometimes, in case you want to get married and you need a photographer. Yeah, and now I'm going to play us out with a song called Never Return by a band called Carvings. I'll hope to see you next week. I'm traveling a lot next week. I hope I can get a show out. I will do my best. Until then, stay free, stay open source, and always aim to misbehave.